Welcome to InTouch, dedicated to real estate professionals worldwide. We're here to educate you, entertain you, and empower you in all facets of real estate. Are you ready for the latest news, trends, and market updates? Then it's time to get in touch.
And let's take a station break and go right into a commercial. Today we are eating Cheerios. No, we're not going to do that. All right. All right. Hello and welcome to the show. Today we have Mindi Landry and Sherry Powers. They are both one of our top producing sales agents in Southern California market, and we're excited to have them on the show. Our podcast topic is how to work with agents who don't understand their role and responsibilities, and how to learn and apply discernment when working with this type of realtor. So we've all had, that agent that we've had to work with, and we've got frustrated, and sometimes the escrow won't close, and it's basically a nightmare, and you have to pull your hair out. But we've got Sherry and Mindi here today, and we're going to discuss that. We've got a couple questions we're going to ask them on how they do it, and this should be pretty fun. Both Sherry and Mindi, you have over 5 decades of dedicated service and experience between you. And if I look at your website right now and your profile pictures, it looks like you just got out of high school. So those are probably updated pictures. They're beautiful, but you look like you're 25 years old. Now, that's amazing. So you've kept up your appearances very well, right? Right, Mindi?
What makes you think that I'm not 25 years old?
I know you've been in the business longer than 25, so that's the only way I know. And you also used to do penny saver ads. So most people on here, if you know what penny saver is, that goes back a little ways.
Yeah, those are updated pictures. And yes, I used to do penny saver ads. We were featured as the top agent when we met certain criteria in those days. And that was a very popular publication.
And what's the best way for people that are listening to the podcast, if they want to find and get to both you and Sherry, because you're combined force now, what's the best way for them to get to your website? How would they find you?
LandryandPowers.com.
Oh, that's just too simple. You must have spent thousands of dollars to get that URL. That's awesome. Yeah, I was checking out your website last night and it looks fantastic. So it really looks nice and clean. So if anybody's looking for Sherry and Mindi, that's the best way to find them. And you can also see if they've got properties listed or what they're working on. So with that being said, let's get into the topic today. I've got a few questions. We don't have a lot of questions here, but this may help out other agents that are listening that have experienced these challenges. So the first question, and I'll start off with Sherry since she hasn't gotten to speak yet. Sherry, I was just thinking about this. What are some of the early signs that you're communicating with a pro who will be a professional and easy to work with before accepting an offer from that agent? What are the early signs for that?
So many things boil down to communication. And I really think that an early sign of a pro, in my experience, is communication and responsiveness. So they'll stack their communication. For example, if you have a listing and this is a buyer's agent coming to you for the first time with an offer, they email a beautiful offer, a clean and happy offer, but they also text you that it's there in your inbox, and they ask you to confirm receipt, and they call you and they just introduce themselves. And hopefully, ideally, you've met before the offer came in, and that's part of communication because they want to know a little bit more about. They have questions. The buyer might have questions from the seller that you can help the buyer's agent answer for their client. But they can also tell you who they are as a professional and a little bit about their clients and give you the opportunity to ask what kind of buyers. Are they cash? Are they borrowers? Conventional, VA, FHA, timelines. You can really get to know each other well beforehand. but that is a consistent stacking effect when they email, text, and call. Email, text, and call. And it's so much more effective in the long run because everybody's doing different things. And so they're catching you where you're at. And you also know that you don't have to go digging for something because they've covered their bases. So communication, communication, communication.
Yeah, yeah, almost like location, location. I get that. And I think one of the most important things you said there is call. Most people don't like to pick up the phone and call for some reason. They're afraid of that. So if you can find a real estate agent that will actually call you, that goes a long ways. And I know getting skilled at recognizing that authentic version of a top agent, where we're going to call it here the GOAT agent, right? Greatest of all time. I think Sherry, you're the one that brought that up. What's the best way, Sherry, to spot a poorly skilled agent or one with a difficult, let's say, personality?
I really think it's the opposite of communication. I I'm a never I'm never not surprised when people just send. I'm back to the listing side of things. It happens on both sides, but if you have a listing and a buyer's agent just sends an offer by email and doesn't say another word, that's a sign that they need a little bit of brushing up on their skills, because you may or may not be getting to your email until later that day or sometimes even the next day. So they're doing a disservice to their client. That's one example. On the other side, when you have a buyer and you make an offer and you've covered your bases and the listing agent just blows you off or ghosts you, I think that is a sign that it's going to be tricky with that person if your client gets under contract with theirs.
Yeah, and you really don't want it to be tricky, do you? I mean, it's hard enough to go close a 30-day property within that time with all the people involved. The two main characters or leaders should be the two real estate agents that brought the offer together. So I'm going to ask on Mindy's side, what are some of the early clues, Mindy, that other agents may be less than proficient or like fully engaged in the transaction?
A little bit of evasiveness or a lot, unwillingness to respond in a timely manner, avoiding answering direct questions, providing a little bit of documentation and not all of the documentation that may be requested of them, not returning phone calls, texts, or emails in a timely manner, or not at all, and acting like everything is okay, and they're not understanding what the sense of urgency is. I noticed that a lot of agents out there do not understand the real estate law and the timelines in a contract. And even though we may bring that to their attention and explain that we will have to take certain actions if they fail to perform in those time frames, they are evasive and act like, well, it's no big deal. Well, it is a big deal. We have a fiduciary relationship to our client, be it a seller or a buyer. And when we're under a real estate contract, we are having to make sure people are performing according to what is in that contract. A lot of agents do not know their contracts.
So, Mindy, you know your contracts pretty well, I take it, because you do sit on a board, right? And you have been in mediation before, uh, and that's usually where you'll end up if you've got two people. It could be an agent, could be a buyer, could be a seller, and there's some disagreements, and they didn't read the contract or they forgot their timelines. And you've probably end up in front of those tables with some of those people, right?
Oh, yes. It's very sad to end up in a arbitration, which is about money, or a mediation, which is about helping opposite parties come to an agreement between themselves, and we're just leading and conversing between them all, trying to get them to open up and realize that there could be some compromise or an ethics dispute. And what I notice on those times and in those times, a lot of times it would take a simple apology, which means a person has to let go of their pride or their need to be right and just be a human. And sometimes a simple apology and corrective action will solve a lot of problems.
Well, that's fantastic. And you definitely don't want to get to mediation. So knowing your contract is number one, and they do change the contract around. So do take classes and do participate in your broker's trainings. But to go back to the question, Mindy, or kind of the follow-up is how do you proactively manage relations with them and maybe even gently coach and encourage them to desire to be better? When I say them, I'm saying the other agent.
Well, Sherry and I are very proactive about this. In California, you can serve a buyer notice to perform if you're a listing agent and a buyer has not delivered the contracts, the signed disclosures, and signing off on certain things in certain timeframes per the contract. We will let the selling agent know that the time frame is approaching for those things to be lifted, and then we will put them on notice per the contract. We can do that in California a few days ahead of time and let them know that the seller's reserving the right to cancel the contract if they do not perform within that time frame. That is something that is pretty abrupt to a lot of agents on the other end when they don't understand the contract. But we have to do that on behalf of our client. We have to help protect our client's contractual rights. And so it may seem like we are being harsh, but no, we're just simply doing our job and doing the best we can to protect our client to the best of our ability within the framework of those contracts that we're abiding by. And so we try to be very proactive in communication, as Sherry has said from the very beginning, in letting the agent on the other end know this is the timeline we've agreed to. All parties have agreed to this. This is the expectation. This is what's going to happen possibly if they cannot get those things lifted in their documents that they have to do. And simple communication could really diffuse a lot of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all about communication, as you and Sherry both said. And certainly if you present somebody a timeline and then you have to remind them about it. And if they're not communicating with you, and normally if you communicate with somebody, oh, well, okay, we can give you an extension or we can talk extensions. Your lender needs a couple more days. That's okay. But you do have to put it in writing. You can't just say, oh, well, you should have given us 3 more days and not just tried to, cancel on us. But, it all goes back to the timelines. And if you don't know those timelines, and you should, I've got a transaction coordinator that that sends out a timeline of everything at the beginning of the transaction to all parties involved, so they know what the timelines are. And I tell them, If I'm working with a buyer, print that out, put that on your refrigerator. Don't buy anything, don't do anything. Just look at those timelines until we're finished with escrow. So it's really important, especially. I mean, we're not selling shoes here. We're selling $1 million properties. So you do have to stick with what the contract says, especially here in California. Um, let's go over to Sherry. What are some of the telltale signs that alert you to the fact that you're working with a highly competent agent, or on the other hand, maybe an untried or difficult novice on the other side?
Before I answer that, I wanted to just add one thing to the previous question, if I may.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. I think for me, asking questions as far as uncovering and trying to gently coach people, probing but polite questions is really helpful. And even if the person on the other end, the other agent doesn't like the question and they might get defensive, then now you know more about who you're dealing with. And so, for example, about 5 or 6 years ago, a broker owner that I have a lot of respect for was talking about the notice to the buyer to perform. And I know there's a notice for the seller as well, but it comes up with buyers more often. And she was saying that she wished that people understood that document as more of a gate and less of a fence, more of a door and less of a wall, to keep things moving. And so I asked somebody that wasn't being a buyer's agent, that wasn't being responsive. I asked her when we got under contract, I asked her, how do you feel about the notice to perform in general? And her answer, she blew up. She got defensive immediately. And I probably could have asked it differently or maybe at a different time before, but that told me that a lot of agents, we don't understand that the notice to perform is a really good way to keep the traffic flowing. And just asking the question told me a lot. And it told me we don't always understand the contracts, that there's a reason, a positive reason, not just a punitive reason for having these things in place, because we all want to get our clients to the goal, to closing. And that's a way to keep that moving forward and avoid having to have extensions, which happen all the time. But it was so interesting to me. So I just wanted to add, to ask probing but polite questions is a good way to gently coach, uncover where the person is coming from. And then that helps me as an agent adjust my approach in return. Or, I have to work extra hard, or maybe the door's open for, hey, for example, I'm probably going on a little bit longer with this, but we had a listing agent recently who he didn't understand there's two contracts, the SPBB and the BRBC, and the way he read our client's offer is he thought we were asking for a higher commission than his seller was prepared to give. And just by his response, we knew he didn't know about this huge national settlement with the National Association of Realtors, or the way all the contracts changed in July. And so, asking people questions about their understanding of things when you see an incomplete contract like I said, I keep saying probing but polite manner, is super helpful to keep things moving along.
Yeah, that's excellent. I'm glad you brought that up. And it's too bad we don't have notes here where we could say, well, what are those questions, and add those to the podcast. But if anybody does have questions, feel free to send Sherry an email. You need help, because she can probably save you some time and money by asking just a few questions that may make another agent say, well, I don't even want to work with you. This is going to be too difficult, because you're working, within the confines of the contract and you know what you're doing. If the other agent's going to get flustered up front, well, guess what? Maybe that's not the right relationship for you to put together for your seller if you're representing the a seller.
Exactly. And then, one other note on that. For me, I think it's important to have your go-to people, such as you and Mindy. And when I don't understand something, if I don't understand something, and that happens often, call and even let the person, if you feel like the person can help you, I don't quite understand what you're saying. Can you clarify? It's okay to not know everything. So that's just for my own personal edification. That's always something I can do better, is asking for slow down, ask, could you please explain that to me? To quote Michael Scott from The Office, like I'm an 8-year-old. And then if I don't understand, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old until I understand it, because it could be me. I could be the one misunderstanding things. As far as your other question, Gary, about telltale signs you're working with a highly competent agent, I find the really solid agents oftentimes thank me for calling them. They say something like, they exhale and they say, thank you for calling me. Do you know how much it means to me that you call and ask me these questions? You're saving us all so much time and headache. And that's always the first sign that I want to work with that person because I know they're going to give the same kind of communication in response. And somebody who's very encouraging, like Mindy's really good at this. She's so good at when the other agent, and we've just been working with a lot of listings, and I know she's more of a listing agent. We've had buyers too, but when they are not quite up to snuff and they kind of drop the ball and make things difficult for us, she continues to be very encouraging. And I think that goes a long way. I don't know because I'm not in the other person's head, but instead of saying you blew it, she's saying, okay, well, thank you for, getting that over to me. That was awesome. And at the end of the transaction, you were great to work with. Just always keeping things on a positive note without, letting schlocky work slip or whatever.
Absolutely. No, these are all like little gems that people can go back to and listen to this podcast over and over, because some of these things, you're going, if you're in real estate, it's a career, you're going to come across this. It's 100% true. This is going to happen, and you have to learn how to work with different kinds of agents. And sometimes you're going to get into situations that maybe you're going to need a little help too. You can call a Mindy, or you can call, we have broker support here at AARE. Call one of the broker support hotlines to walk you through some difficult situations or questions that maybe you don't understand. You should always have a go-to person. I do, just as Sherry, you do, and Mindy, I'm sure you do also, because you can't know everything. You can't know everything all at once. It's just it's a changing career and field, and things happen and situations come up that you might need a little bit of help. But that's why we're here, and that's actually why we're doing the podcast too, to help other people out. So I'll go over to Mindy, and I have a question here for you that I think you'll love. It's important to note that life happens in real time for the other agents. So let's discuss the balance between being compassionate yet firm in our resolve to represent our client's best interests. Like if there was a divorce or an illness or a death in the family could be happening in the background and we don't know about it, right? So how do you keep your own emotions or ego in check when you find yourself stuck in a transaction with an unskilled or uncooperative agent? Very politically correct the way we say that, but what do you think about that, Mindy?
I think it happens a lot, and it happens behind the scenes more than we know. I think that when we go into a knee-jerk reaction and want to rip somebody's lips off, which I say a lot, and I really feel that way from time to time, although you won't know it. I think we need to stop and take a deep breath and have a conversation with God and say, God, I'm really frustrated here. I'm trying to do my job. I'm trying to do it right. I'm trying to do it in the best interest of all parties. I'm not getting any cooperation here. Help the girl. Well, resoundingly, I'm going to hear, there's a problem, Mindy, that you're not aware of. Have some grace. And we have been through a few situations here recently where that has been the case. And it's good to be humble. And when an agent on the other end says, I'm really sorry, I've been blowing it lately, going through a really hard time personally. And if that agent shares that information, then Sherry and I, because we're on the same page, will make sure that we let that agent know, wow, thank you for letting us know. We are going to keep you in prayer specifically for whatever you've just told us, and we're going to lift you up. And I'll tell you what, that diffuses a lot. So sometimes it gets like that. And when we make assumptions, I won't say where fingers point with that word assumption, but it does affect you and me when we make assumptions. And I think everybody knows the colloquialism on that one. But that is something we need to stay in check with as agents on our side of the fence and in our reality, because if we're not in check, things can roll out of hand. And so it takes a bit of humility and grace to get through really tough times. But we're all human and we all have stuff going on. Everybody does. And we have to remember that for both sides, for both sets of parties, and for the agents. We just had a situation where seller wanted to sell some personal things to the buyer. We represented the buyer. And the seller told the buyer that she was going to be leaving, what she was going to be leaving, and this is how much she wanted for it. She didn't ask. She just told at the final walkthrough the buyer this. Well, the buyer thought about that, and he decided he did not want everything she was offering. And, he counter-proposed through us what he was willing to pay for and buy. And it was communicated to us through the listing agent that she was in tears over that. Well, that just broke our heart because she was a stalwart seller. We would have loved to have had her as a client. And we were really sorry that, our client's counter proposal put her over the edge. And those are the up close and personal things that happen in a real estate transaction. We both immediately responded to the listing agent by email because he said, my seller's in tears over this. And we said, wow, we really appreciate and respect and like your seller. There was no intention to upset her. We were simply communicating what our buyer's wishes were, and we're really sorry she's in tears. And that's the best we can do, is be human beings. Does that answer your question?
It does, and the fact that you have emotions that will enter in a transaction does make it difficult, right? So we still, in the end, you still have to go back to the contract and what is the best for the seller and the buyer, and putting everything in writing and bringing it all the way to the end so you can hand over those keys. And we certainly don't want people frustrated at the end and wish they never bought the house. you can get to that point when you do final walkthroughs and they find something that wasn't there before. And so, gosh, yeah, you're going to get a lot of different emotions. And you never know what's going to happen towards the end. But our job, your jobs, our job together is to keep it going, keep the flow going, keep the communication going, and bring it all the way to the end where you can just hand over those keys and hopefully everybody is happy by the end, happy ending. Um, and I'll ask Sherry a question. What are some tips on ending well, even when the road it gets kind of rocky towards the end?
I think I probably answered that question before. Not, I'm not scolding you that I answered it before, but I was jumping ahead as usual. Mindy knows I tend to do that sometimes, but she does that very well. That tip that I thought of when you were asking, Gary, that she encourages the other agent in all circumstances, even if they're, for lack of well, let's just say substandard, that even if they're doing a substandard job and they've been uncooperative or unskilled or whatever the problem has been, is thanking them at the end, and letting them know that you wish them the best. And you don't want to lie and say you did a great job, but we're people as realtors. We do this in large part because we love people and we love serving people. And so encouraging that relationship and not burning that bridge at the end of it, I think, is a way to end on a fine note. And also, I just thought of this while I was talking. You can say, hey, if you ever want to, if things were not too rocky, if you ever want to get together for a cup of coffee, or if you ever have any questions, I'm here. Keeping that door open for future relationships is so important, because even if you're not a people person, and I don't know how you could survive in this business if you don't really love people, you certainly don't want to damage relationships, because this is also a reputation-based business. And even though it says right in our code of ethics that we are not to speak ill of other agents, we all know that people do that. And so we want to be the one that others admire. And like I said, Mindy does a great job with that.
I think that remaining humble all the way through the transaction and until it's closed and after it's closed, remaining humble is a big part of that, and remaining professional. Behind closed doors, we can vent, and we do, and we need to, because we're only human. But remaining humble and professional is what I think is so great about the agents in AARE, wanting to do the right thing and staying focused on answering to God in the big picture. Really, that's what we're doing. And that's who's at the head of every transaction. I pray before every appointment, and I pray for God's will and for God's words to be in my mouth and to come out of my mouth. And at the close of escrow, I pray for those people involved in the transaction that I know need prayer. And I just wish everybody well in my heart, and that they can move on, because going through a real estate transaction is very stressful. It's one of the most stressful times of a person's life, along with moving and death and divorce. Those are some really hard and ugly times, and brings you down to the core of your soul. And so we are not working with people in the best of situations. And we will get to know them, if we're smart, after the close of escrow. We will have some personal time with them where everybody can just breathe and not have to deal with making decisions and dealing with everything that goes on in a real estate transaction, but now really building a strong relationship, especially if we've done our job well. So I think it's really important. Remain humble.
Definitely some wise words there, and it's nice that you do, pray before, bring it to God before His kingdom, because if you don't, you're going to get really stressed out and wish you had. Mindy, so at what point should you or would you involve a difficult agent's broker?
That that's a tightrope. Um, Sherry and I have had some situations where we have been very close to calling the broker on the other side. We try to avoid that so that we don't ruffle feathers in the middle of a transaction and we can get through a transaction smoothly or as smooth as possible without throwing salt on a wound. And if we think it's going in the wrong direction ethically or professionally, or it's going to do damage to one or both of the clients. And remember, we may have a fiduciary with one set of clients, but really the code of ethics says we are to be honest and fair dealing with all parties in a transaction. If we feel like there's going to be, and we're heading down the road towards damaging a client on either side, I think that would be the line of delineation. What do you think, Sherry?
I agree. It is important not to, add fuel to fire, to the fire if there's a little fire kindling in the middle of the transaction. And I think when it is going to damage the client that we represent, or maybe even the client on the other side, or both, at some point you have to let the agent know, I'm going to have to involve your broker because we're just not getting closure on something and we can't move forward without this. But I think when you have to use discernment and wisdom about when, but when you do, it might result in that agent getting feedback that they're not going to get from someone else. So in that respect, it could be a blessing to involve the broker, because then the broker can, the broker has a choice to either, help that agent and bring them up to speed or not. That's their call, but we have to at least give them the opportunity to set them in a more productive direction. But you don't just, call the broker at the drop of a hat. And I've had a few situations where really, brokers have been able to get involved and add wisdom and bring things to closure. Either the unfortunately the escrow is canceled, or they're able to help salvage it. But again, I think the important part is getting that feedback to the buyer's agent or the listing agent that there's a course correction that's needed. It's so much about setting expectations, and we expect a lot from ourselves. We have high standards for ourselves, and we also expect the people that we're in contract or representing on the other side of the contract as the agent. We expect them to meet standards as well, and if they don't, that feedback needs to go someplace so that they have an opportunity to improve.
When I am kerflumped, that's a Barbara Streisand word, it's Yiddish, and I really don't know how to solve a problem. And let's face it, most of us are problem solvers and we are control freaks and we want to take control and make it happen. Well, sometimes it's not going to be us that's going to make it happen. And when I'm really frustrated and I don't know how to get through a situation, I go to bed that night and I ask God for answers. And that I tell God, I know that I will wake up with the ahas that you're going to download into me tonight. Please bring me answers that will work for all parties. I am at my wits' ends and I need your help. I can't figure it out. And your servant here has done her best, and you've given her all the tools that she needs to do a job and do it well. But I'm confused and I don't know what to do, Lord. So download the answers. And I will tell you 99% of the time, I wake up the next morning with an aha or two or three that just make me want to click my heels like Snoopy and run off running to help solve a problem. So there are a lot of times where I'm so frustrated and I'm just gonna, but that's when it's time to I gotta just be quiet and listen.
So, Mindy, that does two things. Number one, you have communication with a higher power. Number two, hopefully you're giving it 24 hours or at least 12 hours to calm down. It gives you more time to think. It gives other people more time to think. And sometimes you'll wake up in the morning and get an email and it'll say, "Oh, hi, Mindy. Well, we fixed this problem and now we can move on." A lot of times that'll happen. It'll just fix itself because you gave it some time, right?
Yep. Yep. How refreshing. Yes.
Yeah. So that's fantastic. Well, I want to thank both Mindy and Sherry for their time today and their wisdom. I think this is going to be one that we can listen to for many times over when you're in your car. But I do want to end it with a scripture that I thought was appropriate. It's very short scripture, but very appropriate to end the show. Is in James 1:19 through 20. And this is said, "Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger." And I think that pretty much says it all, and kind of ends in that, take your time. I know we're on a time limit, but give it some thought before you react to other people, other agents, and just you know, be, just give it up to God, and 99.9% of the time that will end well, maybe 100%. But anyway, I want to thank you, Sherry and Mindy, and we will see you in the podcast next week. And I'm sure we'll have Andrew Arroyo in on that one. And you all have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary.